All right, you guys, so we're doing lesson 5.14. In this case, it talks about the discriminant. So a few things about the discriminant in this case, guys. Discriminant is actually the expression or value we use to determine the number of solutions an equation has. So in this case, just a few of our vocab terms here. We have the quadratic formula, we have discriminant, and we also have distinct real numbers. So in this case, guys, we're going to go ahead and start off here. So if you want to pause the video and copy this down, go ahead and do that. But in this case, guys, the quadratic formula, once again, we did see this in the previous lesson, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And once again, in this case, guys, the discriminant is described as something that determines the number of solutions in a quadratic equation. Now, what you guys see here highlighted in pink, guys, or inside the square root, that is actually the formula for the discriminant. So we use the formula of b squared minus 4ac to determine our discriminant value and the number of solutions. Now, based on this here, based on the discriminant that we have here, the formula of b squared minus 4ac, if when we solve it, we get a positive number, in this case, positive number, then that means we have two solutions. So if you take a look at the graphs here up to the right, the one that is highlighted in blue in this case, that's actually a graph that has a positive discriminant because it has two solutions. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and do positive there. So that's that one. Now, moving on to the next one, we have 0. And in this case, it talks about having a discriminant, which is when you substitute it into our equation here, we get a 0 as our answer. We should have one solution. So once again, it's the graph here that's highlighted in purple. Once again, it only has one solution because it only touches the x-axis once. So therefore, our discriminant there should be a 0, which means having one solution. Now, the last one in this case, guys, which is a negative. In this case, if you have a negative number when you substitute for the discriminant, then you actually have no solution. So if you take a look at the graph here, at the green one, you want to go ahead and check how many times this graph actually crosses the x-axis, and it actually doesn't cross it. So then our answer there would be a negative discriminant and 0 as our solutions. So in this case, guys, we're going to go ahead and work with quadratic equations, do basic substitution with our formula that we have up here. And then we'll go ahead and determine the number of solutions and our value. So let's go ahead and get started here. And in this case, guys, example 1, it says f of x equals a 3x squared plus an 24x plus 48. And they're asking us here to find the value of the discriminant. Now, before I start using the formula here, we do need to identify our A, B, and C values. So that's the first thing we should be doing. So first thing, I want to go ahead and identify A, B, and C. So question for you guys is, what is A? A in this case, guys, is a number in front of the x squared, so that's 3. B is a number in front of the x, which is 24. And C is our constant, the number that's by itself. It has no variable, so that's 48. Now, from there, I'm going to go ahead and write my formula down, which is b squared minus 4ac. B squared minus 4ac. So all we're doing in this case, guys, is basic substitution. Wherever I see an A, I'll substitute for the 3. Wherever we see a B, we'll substitute for the 24. And wherever we see a C, we'll substitute for the 48. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's going to become 24 squared minus 4 times A times C. And I'm going to go ahead and bring out my calculator, guys. I'm going to go ahead and actually type this in our calculator. And we have 24 squared. In this case, guys, I could put it in parentheses, but whenever it comes to having negative b values, you need to make sure you put that in parentheses. So I'll actually just do that from the beginning. So that would be 576. And then we have a negative 4. Once again, that's negative, so that's why it's a negative. Times a 3 times a 48. And that's going to be negative 576. Now, 576 minus 576 is actually going to give us a 0. So the 0 in this case is actually the value of the discriminant. So our value of the discriminant there would be 0. Now, because our value here is 0, that means if we go back here, if we get a 0 as our value for the discriminant, then we should have one solution. So our value in this case, value of the discriminant, is 0. And then the number of solutions is going to be 1. All right, so those would be our two answers. All right. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And the next one, guys, we are going to be doing the same thing. We have f of x equals an x squared minus a 3x plus 18. And we want to go ahead and find, once again, the value of the discriminant. So first things first, guys, let's go ahead and identify a, b, and c. So a in this case, guys, is a 1, b is -3, and c is 18. Now let's go ahead and do our basic substitution here. We have b squared minus 4ac. So let's go ahead and do basic substitution. B in this case, guys, is a -3, so I need to put that in parentheses. -3 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c. So let's go ahead and input this in our calculator. Now, in this case, guys, once again, I do say, and I want to mention it again, whenever you have a negative and you're squaring a negative number, you need to make sure you include parentheses because it is not the same thing. In this case, if you're saying a -3 squared, it's the same thing as saying -3 times a -3. And in this case, that should give us a 9. But look what happens if I do a -3 without the parentheses and I square it. We actually get a -9 there. So we need to make sure that we include our parentheses so that way it could include the negative value. So in this case, that's going to be a 9. And then 4 times 18 is going to be 72. So that's -72. So and I have 9 minus 72, and that's going to give us a -63. Now, this here, guys, this here is the value of the discriminant. So value of discriminant is -63. And because we have a negative number, once again, -63, it is a negative number, we should have, in this case, since it's negative, we should have 0 solutions or no solutions. So in this case, our number of solutions is going to be 0. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and take a look in this case, guys, at the bottom ones. And in this case, the bottom ones are graphs. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at this one. Now, in this case, they're asking you if the discriminant of the function here is either a positive, a 0, or a negative. And the way to determine that, once again, it's by the number of x-intercepts. So it would be positive if it has 2 x-intercepts. It would be 0 if it has 1, and it would be negative if it has no x-intercepts. So once again, it's based on how many x-intercepts we have. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just highlight my x-axis because that's where I find my x-intercepts. And in this case, guys, in this graph, this actually crosses the x-axis once at one point. So our discriminant in this case would be a 0 because there is only one x-intercept. So let's go ahead and move on to this next one. And in this next one, once again, how many x-intercepts does this function have? How many times does a function cross our x-axis? And in this case, it actually doesn't cross it. It comes close to it, but it doesn't cross it. So it actually has 0 x-intercepts. And because it has 0, we actually have a negative value. So our answer there is negative. All right. And last one in this case. We have how many x-intercepts here? And we actually have 2. We have 1 here and 1 there. So because we have 2, our answer here would be positive. All right. Now I do want to